Parker Brothers presents Eyewitness Newsreel Challenge, an exciting new VCR game. Hours of pure enjoyment. Test your powers of observation and memory as over 100 scenes of world history pass before your very eyes.
Brother.
Just get on with the game.
How do you play this?
I don't know. I thought Dad knew.
I never said that.
Is somebody going to tell us how to play?
How to play. Are you ready to start?
Yeah, I guess so.
Where's that voice coming from?
First, divide into two teams. You can play with as few as 2 people, 1 per team.
Yeah, what about me?
What about Harry?
What do we do with Harry? Go for a walk.
If there is an odd number of players, 1 team gets an extra. Having an extra player is not necessarily an advantage.
We'll take Harry. Fine with us.
Great!
Give each player a pencil and a sheet from the notepad. Choose which team will ask questions first. Teams will alternate, going first for each round.
We'll go first.
Okay.
Choose a player to operate the VCR machine, someone who knows how to work it.
Let me. What do I do?
Start the tape at the beginning of a film clip and stop it at the end. Gameplay is simple. Both teams watch the film clip simultaneously. While watching, try to glean as much information as possible from it. Go ahead and take notes. Anything you see or hear is fair game. Stop the tape at the end of the clip. Now, huddle with your team and agree on 2 questions to ask the other team. Your questions must be based on what you actually saw or heard on the clip, not on any trivia you might personally know about the subject matter. Have one person write down the questions on his note sheet. As long as you're at it, make up 1 or 2 extra questions, just in case.
Just in case what? Shh. Let the man talk.
Whichever team has been picked to go first, goes first. Ask the other team your 2 questions, 1 at a time. The team being questioned is not allowed to refer to their notes.
Okay, first question. How many horses were shown?
You answer the questions as a team.
3. That's right.
Lucky guess. I told you that was too easy.
A correct answer lets you move your scoring peg ahead 1 space in the scoreboard.
Second question. This'll get him.
Name the 5 people mentioned in the clip.
No multi-part questions.
Yeah. Cheaters. Okay. Name the first person mentioned in the clip. Roy Rogers.
Wrong. Tom Mix.
If you ask a question the other team can't answer, then you get to move your peg ahead 1 space. The teams then switch roles, the questioners becoming the questionees, and vice versa.
Huh?
He means you get to ask your 2 questions.
Oh, okay. One of our questions is the same as theirs. Do we get to make up a new one?
Yes. Use one of the extra questions you made up just in case.
How many cowboys were wearing hats?
3.
No, only 2.
Wait a minute. That's not right.
If your team feels it has answered correctly when the other team decides it hasn't, your team may challenge.
We challenge.
Play the film clip again for verification.
We're right. You're wrong.
The team that is correct collects its point, plus an additional point for winning the challenge. When both sides have asked 2 questions, the round is over. Round 2 begins by showing another film clip. Play continues until one team's peg reaches the end of the scoreboard. That team wins.
I figured that much.
You can ask questions on anything verifiable by the tape. Action, clothing, backgrounds, words or numbers seen on screen, or any information given in the soundtrack. There are over 100 film clips. You can start anywhere you want to on the tape and don't have to play them in any particular order. Eyewitness is replayable forever.
Sure. What if we see another clip?
Play them over. There are dozens of visual and audio details in each clip.
Do you have to know the answer to the question you're asking?
Yes. You can also play Eyewitness with 3 players or teams. The rules are the same. Make up 2 questions, but you're going to ask each team just 1 of them.
That seems simple enough.
Are you ready to play now?
Wait a minute.
If you have any more questions, refer to the rules sheet included in your game box.
We have to read?
Boy.
Pay attention. Here comes the first clip.
Hey, wait a minute.
What's going on? We're shrinking. You can't do this to me.
What's that on top of us?
Just watch the clip.
Okay.
Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. A monument marks the spot where in 1903, 2 brothers made history's first powered flight. But some people couldn't leave well enough alone. One pioneer unveiled his parasol plane, built to fly the Pacific. It didn't. Also in California, a beer barrel plane made mouths water. The principle was simple. You rose by scooping up the air like a bucket scoops up water. This Sky Leviathan could go anywhere as long as you pulled it. Called the Gray Goose, it was more like a homing pigeon or a fancy doorstop. In Germany, Otto Lilienthal invented the bird plane, complete with feathers and flapping wings. Chicago produced the Ferris wheel plane, which is tied down securely to keep it from flying away too soon. You can untie it now.
Stop tape and play. Called the cradle of American industry, this laboratory was the workplace of Thomas Alva Edison, America's greatest inventing genius. Edison worked tirelessly for over 50 years, taking out 1,033 patents. A childhood accident left his hearing greatly impaired. Edison's first invention was a mechanical vote recorder in 1868. His last work was on synthetic rubber. He gained fame in 1877 with the cylinder phonograph, bringing entertainment into the home itself. 1879, the first incandescent lamp. In 1891, he came up with the kinetoscope, a motion picture machine. This is how movies began, not on a screen, but in a box. The Black Maria was the first motion picture studio. It revolved on a circular track to follow the sun. This 1893 film, one of the oldest in existence, was made by the inventor himself. In hundreds of U.S. towns, a magic lantern lecture given by a traveling auto salesman heralded the end of the horse and the beginning of a new age. By 1900, there were more than 40 automobile factories already in operation, but it was generally regarded as a noisy, smelly, and dangerous toy. Salesmen often had a hard time getting the proper respect for the transportation miracle. It was a red-letter day when the first auto came to town, but for years to come, the road ahead was still rough, literally. As late as 1904, there were fewer than 150 miles of paved roads in all the U.S. The first driver's licenses were issued in Paris in 1893, but it would be another decade before the practice caught on. American drivers, studying from a book of instructions, often learned how to start before they read the chapter on how to stop. In the early 20s, aeronauts strove to perfect a strange windmill on wheels called a helicopter. This French model never got as high as an elephant's eye, and yet the result was a new world record. Designed for very short pilots, this version could make a grown man duck. Careful, men. Watch out for tricks. Detroit gave us the first umbrella helicopter. As light as lead and cast iron could make her, this merry-go-round was supposed to jump into the air. In France, this copter had a pair of oversized pinwheels, an aerial bucking bronco. Back to the drawing board. On the drawing board, they added a gas bag and pilot. She was dubbed the Flying Sausage, but the ground crew came up with a few other names. This is how they got airsick back in 1921. It began life as the wireless, but gradually changed its name to radio. The original stations were modest enterprises set up by radio manufacturers so people who bought their sets would have something to listen to. But as soon as they realized you could advertise on the airwaves, the new gadget took off. Jazz bands like the A&P Gypsies. You could get the latest news reports from radio, too. The new medium's strength was its believability. Anything going out to an entire nation of listeners had to be true.
Let me tell you about McTavish's Skinless Weenies. So long.
As radio's developer learned too late, the inventor does not control the use of his invention.
New York City. Gentlemen, what have you done to my child, the radio broadcast?
The success of the Otto spurred inventors on to new achievements, like this locomotive car with smokestack and coal furnace, which all too quickly puffed its way into history. The French torpedo car was designed to go 6 miles a minute if it didn't by accident sail straight off to Mars. Probably no vehicle ever looked so fast and went so slow. One inventor attempted to solve the problem of streamlining with the backwards car. He didn't cut down on wind resistance, but boy, how he startled the other drivers. The most novel of auto inventions was England's Dynastair, which did away with the car entirely and just used the tire. What a position the blighter would be in if the thing has a blowout. Ever since Icarus, man has dreamed of strapping on a pair of wings. This Connecticut inventor says, why not? If it hadn't been for gravity, he might have done fine. Smiling and confident, an English wizard flaps the ailerons of his reclining or divan-type one-man glider. The principle is supremely simple. When the car reaches airspeed, off he'll fly to whirl and loop happily overhead. Tough break, old bean. Can't have another go. This inventor learned from his predecessor's mistakes. His glider is made out of rubber. Mr. Solvan of France has invented an absolutely safe glider. Mr. Solvan is a cautious man who believes in safety first. Never try this without parental supervision. Let's go back to the Nickelodeon, when the hats were big and the admission price small, only a nickel. The program might have begun with news footage, such as the 1910 funeral of England's King Edward VII, or when President Taft and his successor, Wilson, rode to the 1913 inauguration. The feature might have starred 16-year-old Lillian Gish with Bobby Hannon and Lionel Barrymore as the father. Or it might have been little Mae Marsh, the heroine of D.W. Griffith's epic Birth of a Nation. And no program would be complete without a comedy. Here we have Clara Kimball Young. Her energetic suitor is Sidney Drew, the famous comedy star. Both were highly skilled at batting their eyes. This is meant to be a typical day at Triangle Films, where starting in 1915, Mack Sennett and his crew produced 2 comedies a week for 2 years. Sennett plays himself. The bespectacled scenario writer is Vernon Dent. The only thing missing from this confusion is Sennett's trademark, the Keystone Cops. Of course, the scene is slightly exaggerated. Sennett didn't have an office, his reason being that he was too busy to ever sit down. Although Sennett discovered such stars as Chaplin, Ben Turpin, and Gloria Swanson, he never signed long-term contracts and lost them to other studios. Here, Leo, another Sennett discovery, is handing in his resignation, having gotten a better offer from MGM. These defections never worried Sennett, who considered his own skill as a comedy director to be the real star of his pictures. Thomas Harper Ince was one of the first motion picture giants. Ince is best remembered as the man who brought order out of the chaos of movie making. His studio resembled a small city as seen in this 1922 publicity film. Musicians set the right mood as Louise Glaum and James Kirkwood register pathos. 2 cameras are used so as not to lose any of the actor's spontaneous performance. The artist drawings are turned into blueprints, then into a miniature model to be compared against the finished set. Mornings are spent on the sound stage. Afternoons are spent on location. The result of all that work is brought to the negative developing room. Film is transferred from the developing racks to be dried on the revolving drums, and then checked to maintain the highest quality standards. The day comes to an end as Heinz himself views the rushes. In 1933, beauty queens flocked to Hollywood. But directors wanted only big-name stars like Freda Snobbo,
Why isn't Freda Snobbo here? I must have Snobbo! Get me Snobbo! Yes, sir, fine, sir. Get Snobbo! That's Snobbo! Get Snobbo! Hurry, Miss Snobbo, to come. He has been waiting on the set for 3 weeks. I think I'm too tired.
This was just the break Morlake Sweet Trick had been waiting for all her life.
How about me?
From Miss Donut Center to a shining star in the Hollywood firmament, it's the stuff that dreams are made of.
A new discovery! Amazing! Stupendous! Muscle!
Swaggering into the Old West is none other than Harold Lloyd, playing the character he invented in 1917, The Boy. The Boy was a somewhat shy go-getter, as typified in Pathé's 1918 release, Two Gun Gussie. In this two-reeler, the boy trades his usual straw hat for a 10-gallon as he's determined to become a cowboy. The boy's been reading a book, How to Be Tough in 6 Easy Lessons. Lloyd is best remembered for his astonishing stunt work, such as hanging from the minute hand of a clock 40 stories above the street. But those feats formed only a small part of his total output. The boy was sometimes called the brash young man. It was this innocent brashness that got him into so much trouble and made him so popular. Oh, well, I guess the big guy's hard of hearing. No harm done.
Black Bart is chasing our heroine through the Colorado hills. All right, so Black Bart is riding a seesaw on the Paramount backlot, and our heroine went to lunch an hour ago. Movie makers love making movies about making movies. This one is a Mack Sennett comedy made after he left Triangle Pictures in 1917 to work independently. Since Sennett could no longer use the Keystone name, he called them Mack Sennett comedies, and the public continued to line up. Studios were becoming more sophisticated in their filming techniques. The cyclorama brought a new dimension to the famous Keystone chase scenes. You could reshoot a boat race as many times as you wanted and never move the camera, as long as the chimp's arms held out. The man with the carnation is Charlie Murray, a vaudeville comedian who came to the movies in 1912 in order to get more exercise. Whoops!
From 1914 to the end of the silent era, moviegoers delighted in the weekly serials. They became popular with Pearl White in The Perils of Pauline. But the queen of the thrillers was Ruth Rowland, seen here in the 1921 hit White Eagle. The main characters were women placed in one precarious situation after another. Stunt work was considered part of their jobs, and few doubles were ever used. This is Ruth Rowland's 1919 serial, The Tiger's Trail. Hindu tiger worshippers and crooked cowboys join forces and try for 15 episodes to cheat Ruth out of a gold mine. Pathé released Ruth's 1922 epic Timber Queen, one of the best examples of the mile-a-minute thrillers. This runaway boxcar was filmed on level ground with the camera tilted and undercranked. The Tarzan saving her life is her leading man, Bruce Gordon. In the depths of the Depression, everyone worried about how to make ends meet, even cartoon characters.
We haven't any food and we haven't got a cent. It's weeks and weeks since we paid our rent. your face.
Don't look at me, I'm not your dish.
I once had some hay, but I ate it all up. I ain't had a fly since it was up. Everything's gone.
What do we do now?
I've got an idea. We'll sell the cow. He's got an idea. He'll sell the cow. Sell the cow.
Sell the cow.
In 1908, Republican William Howard Taft won the presidency as Teddy Roosevelt's hand-picked successor. By 1912, Roosevelt had had enough of retirement, but Taft refused to step aside. Taft won the Republican nomination, forcing Roosevelt to form his own Bull Moose Party. The old Rough Rider was hit by an assassin's bullet, but recovered and went right on campaigning, the most colorful figure of his time. Leader of the Democrats for 30 years was William Jennings Bryan. 3 times he had run for the presidency and 3 times been defeated, despite his powers as an orator. But in 1912, it was Woodrow Wilson who won the Democratic nomination. With the Republicans split between Taft and Roosevelt, Wilson was elected, only the second Democrat to hold that office since the Civil War. Warren Harding's death from ptomaine poisoning brought Calvin John Coolidge to the presidency. An all-American character born on the 4th of July, Coolidge was a man of frugal habits and dry wit. He believed that the best government was the least government and made it his goal to do as little as possible to upset the thriving economy of the 1920s. Though ill at ease in public, Coolidge became, up to his time, the most photographed of presidents and one of the most popular, despite Alice Roosevelt's comment that he'd probably been weaned on a pickle. At Deadwood in the Dakota's Black Hills, the Sioux tribes gathered to feather their new head man, Chief Leading Eagle, the Great White Father. Never before such an Indian chief, and never again. Coolidge's stony-faced silence was legendary. In fact, in 1933, when humorist Dorothy Parker was told that Coolidge had died, her first comment was, "How could they tell?" In 1920, this was Edward, Prince of Wales, heir to Britain's throne and one of the world's most handsome bachelors. That year, the young yellow-haired prince visited Hawaii, where, as every place else, he set feminine hearts aflutter. A popular song of the day was, "I danced with a man who danced with a girl who danced with the Prince of Wales." In Hawaii's traditional flower ceremony, Wales got a bit over-bedecked. These were happy days for the romantic prince, who was later to become King Edward VIII and still later the Duke of Windsor. When the prince's younger brother, the Duke of York, married Lady Elizabeth Bowes Lyon in 1923, the world hardly noticed. Who then could have guessed that Edward would give up his throne to marry Mrs. Simpson? That shy George and his pretty bride would rule England. And the 3 queens stood on this balcony, for the babe in arms is Queen Elizabeth. In the summer of '36, the Democrats assembled in Philadelphia to hear Alvin Barkley keynote the convention that nominated Franklin Delano Roosevelt for his second term. Secretary of State Cordell Hull was among the delegates who quickly got to the business at hand. Mr. Roosevelt was nominated by acclamation as his son James looked on. But the convention was not without its Donnybrooks, as die-hard Al Smith followers came to blows over what they termed the steamroller nomination. The president arrived to make his acceptance speech, addressing a throng of 100,000 in Franklin Field.
And so, I accept the commission you have tendered me. I join with you.
Roosevelt was to make 2 more such speeches, accepting the Democratic nomination in both 1940 and 44. Arriving by plane in Caracas, Venezuela, on a goodwill tour of South America, Vice President and Mrs. Nixon met with a so-called student demonstration similar to the one they had previously encountered in Lima, Peru. Fuera, the mob shouted. Go away, Nixon. A reinforced guard protected the United States Embassy, where the Nixons spent most of their time in Caracas. Nixon also visited the Officers Club, where he met with Rear Admiral Larrazabal, head of Venezuela's 5-member ruling junta. Arriving in Washington, D.C., the Nixons were met by President Eisenhower, who created a precedent by making this special gesture. An estimated 100,000 persons cheered the Nixons on their way to the White House, a worthy tribute to the courage and integrity of our Vice President and his wife.
In 1961, Kennedy accepted Nikita Khrushchev's invitation to meet in Europe. It would give Kennedy the chance to propose a nuclear test ban treaty. Jackie, educated at the Sorbonne and fluent in French, accompanied her husband in this important venture into international diplomacy. But first, there was a state protocol visit to France. A curious Europe was anxious to appraise America's young new president. But it was Jackie's beauty and charm that was to prove most captivating. President and Madame de Gaulle welcomed them to Paris. An informal meeting followed. At a Vienna concert given in their honor, the president and Jacqueline finally met their Russian counterparts, Premier Khrushchev and his wife. Sitting beside each other throughout the performance, the couples at least gave the appearance of goodwill.
(1964) saw the passage of the Civil Rights Act, prohibiting discrimination in voting rights, jobs, and housing. July 3rd was an historic day as President Johnson signed the document into law just 5 hours after the House had passed it. He used nearly 100 pens, and one was given to Dr. Martin Luther King, distinguished leader of the movement. But the struggle was not over. Civil rights garnered the spotlight again in February 1965, sparked by demonstrations in the obscure town of Selma, Alabama. When marchers set out for the capital, Montgomery, to protest voter registration rules, they were turned back by troopers and police. Over 2,600 demonstrators were arrested. Dr. King urged his people to seek their rights peacefully. Just the year before, King had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his advocacy of nonviolent protest.
National honor! Stop the bombing!
Under ordinary circumstances, the zoo is a bedlam. But word hasn't been invented to describe what it's like on Kitty's Day. This is when the kids get to meet the animals. A rest area is what everybody's going to need by the time this meeting's over. Gus the goat proceeds to unravel the mysteries of little Egbert's sweater. The pigs love milk, but they get too excited. Prunella's afraid that after they finish the milk, they'll finish Prunella. Susabella quickly loses her bottle and is forced into retreat by an army of rampaging goats. They attack from the front and do a sneak attack from the rear. Gertrude knows it's feeding time, but wants to know who's going to be fed to whom. Uh-oh. And to think all of this started out as just a pleasant little luncheon among friends. Almost from birth, bears seem like natural performers. Oswald likes his milk straight from the keg. On matters of drinking, Melvin takes a firm stand. As for the free lunch, it's still the custom in Beartown, and the service is better than ever. When these big guys aren't holding their feet, they're consuming about 10 pounds of horse meat, fish, apples, and carrots. This is Mrs. Goldenrod and the 3 baby bears, Frisky, Pesky, and Tagalong. Tagalong still has a little growing to do. When he stops, he'll stand up at nearly 8 feet and weigh 900 pounds. The Goldenrod family are grizzly or brown bears. The guys that were holding their feet are called black bears, even though some of them were brown. The people who name animal groups like to confuse you. Mama to the rescue. Mary the canary was a spoiled creature. One day, as she was cycling in Central Park, her eye peeled for the odd worm. She ran right into Freddie the finch. It was love at first sight. The romance flourished during a winter weekend in the Poconos. That summer, Freddie and Mary went for a moonlit canoe ride. Will Freddie pop the question? Will Mary the canary marry? Tune in tomorrow for another exciting episode. A magnifying glass reveals the wonderful world of fleas, where everything is so small that an entire troop of circus stars can fit in the palm of your hand. Let's take a closer look. Uh-oh, a traffic jam. The coach is rolling again, but Rudolph the ringmaster is hopping mad. This show is certainly up to scratch. There's nothing a child loves more than a cute, furry animal. America's toy makers know this and spare no expense in providing the kiddies with the most lovable animal toys ever made. This is Scruffy, the bulldog. If there's one thing a 2-year-old can't resist, it's a snarling dog. One look at Lenny the lion, and Mariana throws away her doll. Lenny's a real sweetheart, as long as he's kept well fed. Horace the friendly frog has little Tommy jumping for joy. As for Allie the gator, well, who could resist? After a rough day testing toys, a guy works up quite an appetite. Set him up, Joe, and don't spare the cream. Gee willikins. Everybody out. School's in session. Some even come by private car. Rover gets a lesson in etiquette for dainty dogs. The tree, yes. The hydrant, no.
And now, a preview of canine fashions, from the latest in puppy wear to this smart green ensemble with chartreuse purse and hat. If you never have the right thing for walking the pooch, we suggest this overcoat in dachshund brown or wolfhound gray. Barkey's Doghouse of Fashion has styles for every taste, from the one-piece business suit to party wear like this sky blue jumpsuit. Buy me that jumpsuit.
You don't want it.
Yes, I do.
You don't have the figure for it.
Oh, look, an original Yves Saint Laurent.
Of the population of the United States, some 35 million, 1/4 of the nation, are children. Upon the way these children are brought up, upon the way their character and intelligence are developed, depends the course the country will take in the future. In few other nations does attention focus more completely upon the junior members of the community, upon their comfort and happiness, upon their education and health. More prosperous than most other peoples, Americans on the average are able to provide a greater measure of security for the young. In the American home, children are brought up in accordance with a social code that recognizes their right to an abundance of affection and attention, of discipline tempered with love. Our children are indeed our future. And now, the gentlemen of the animal kingdom. In this battle for the fur weight championship, canvasback Schmaltz discovered he should have stood in bed. Bertram, the zoo's official cameraman, makes movies of a chamber music group, while George records the sound. Watch out, here come the Sunday drivers. Chester and Vicky have a slow but cozy transport system, while Jessica relies on the tried and true. Here's the bedpost special. Forget the pedaling, let's go motorize. Oh, well. No form of transportation beats the good old-fashioned pony. They might not be going anywhere, but they're having one heck of a time getting there. On her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York on April 15, 1912, the majestic Titanic struck a 100-foot iceberg in the North Atlantic. She was the largest vessel of her day, measuring 882 feet. The passenger list included her designer, Thomas Andrews, John Jacob Astor, and the unsinkable Denver millionairess, Molly Brown. The ship that even God couldn't sink had the latest in electric-powered cranes and marine radio. But her most important equipment would be lifeboats, and the White Star Line had stocked too few in order to make room for Turkish baths and squash courts. Captain E.J. Smith had received iceberg warnings from the German liner America, but refused to change course. Out of 2,200 passengers, 706 lost their lives. This official menu lists the delicious cuisine enjoyed by the first-class passengers only hours before the sinking, a grim memento of the greatest marine disaster in history. On the foggy morning of July 28, 1945, an Army airplane got lost in the skies over Manhattan. At 9:45 a.m., the people in the streets below frantically ran for cover. Flaming, gasoline-soaked rubble showered down on them. The B-25 bomber, carrying a pilot and 2 passengers, had embedded itself between the 78th and 79th floors of the tallest structure in the world, the Empire State Building. Fortunately, it was a Saturday, and only about 1/10 of the skyscraper's occupants were present. Still, the results were tragic. All 3 of the bomber personnel were killed, along with 10 victims accounted for in the building. 26 others were seriously injured, and hundreds of people in the near vicinity received assorted minor injuries, not to mention the fright of their lives. In July of 1940, a brand new bridge was dedicated. Spanning Puget Sound, it connected the Washington State mainland to the Olympic Peninsula. It was the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, but the locals dubbed her Galloping Gertie. Its rigid sides acted like sails, and in any wind at all, the $6.5 million span began undulating like a huge snake. Motorists got seasick crossing it. 4 months later, it was closed down. On the morning of November 7th, the professor of engineering went out into a 42-mile-an-hour gale to film Gertie's behavior. At 11:08, Gertie galloped for the last time. Several suspenders ripped free, and the bridge tumbled into the Sound 190 feet below. Ideas about suspension bridges were radically revised. The Tacoma Bridge was rebuilt in 1950, and it still stands today. (1938), a momentous year of news. In early spring, havoc arrived in San Bernardino, California. Unprecedented rainfall and record floods inundated an area of 3 million population, taking a toll of 87 lives and a damage of 79 million. But through it all, they maintained their sense of humor. On September 21st, nature again rebelled. A West Indian hurricane ravaged the Atlantic coastline. Nearly 600 lives were lost. The New England states were the hardest hit. 14,000 buildings were destroyed and 2,800 boats sunk. It was the great New England hurricane with winds that approached 190 miles an hour. Rescuers left no stone unturned as thousands were rendered homeless by the Northeast's worst tropical storm. The loneliest of fires is a fire at sea. This is the luxury liner Morro Castle burning off the New Jersey coast on September 8, 1934. Passengers can be seen in the water around the doomed ship. Thousands rush to the boardwalk at Asbury Park to watch and help as survivors make the long swim and are pulled from the surf. 137 died. The still smoldering hulk is beached and for a brief time becomes a grisly tourist attraction. This was the pride of France on her maiden voyage in 1935, the fabulous liner Normandy. At a cost of $60 million Depression dollars, it was acclaimed the most beautiful ship ever built. In 1942, as New York workmen were converting the Normandy into troop transport, a spark from a blowtorch set a pile of life preservers on fire. Soon she lay on her side, her days of glory in the past, her future the junkyard.
The German airship, the Hindenburg, was 3.5 days out of Frankfurt when it approached the U.S. Naval Air Station at Lakehurst, New Jersey. The date was May 6, 1937. Just the year before, the hydrogen-filled Zeppelin had made 20 uneventful crossings. A flying luxury liner with observation decks and lounge rooms, the Hindenburg carried 37 passengers and a crew of 60. They waited patiently for the strong headwinds to die down. The salt water ballast was released and the ground crew began to moor the giant ship. The Paramount newsreel camera recorded what happens next. 36 people were burned alive, while a miraculous 61 survived. It took only 34 seconds to burn completely. The official investigation blamed the disaster on St. Elmo's fire, a natural electrical phenomenon.
Winds of hurricane force whipped up the North Atlantic and caught an American freighter in their grip. The flying Enterprise had taken a terrible pounding. Her captain, Kurt Carlson, gave the order to abandon ship to the crew of 40 and 10 passengers, but he staunchly refused to leave his vessel, feeling sure he could keep her afloat. For 13 days, he stayed with her until a rescue ship arrived. A tow cable was shot to the foundering ship, but the cable snapped just 21 miles from Malmouth, England. Carlson leaps to safety moments before the flying Enterprise makes its final plunge to the ocean's bottom. But the world applauds this captain courageous. His wife and 2 daughters look on proudly as Captain Stay Put Carlson gets a hero's welcome in his adopted home of New York City. Well done, Captain Carlson. Your bravery and courage made the world a brighter place in this year of 1952. The year in sports. Lawson Little, returning national amateur champion, tries to repeat his winning performance. Little, also the holder of the British amateur crown, goes on to climax the longest winning streak in the then history of golf by edging out the competition. A double crown winner in 1935. There was jubilation in Harlem. Joe Louis, the Detroit bomber, appeared with his new bride, Marva Louis. They received a popular ovation following Joe's smashing victory over Max Baer. Speed King Sir Malcolm Campbell and his famous Bluebird on the sands at Daytona Beach. In his fastest run, Sir Malcolm averaged 276.8 miles an hour, nearly 5 miles an hour faster than his previous record. Such speed reached the limits of technology, as Sir Malcolm was literally a fraction of an inch from death, the thickness of the Baer fabric on his tires.
In 1919, a young pitcher for the Red Sox hit 29 home runs. By 1920, he was working for the Yankees, who switched him to the outfield, and a legend of Babe Ruth began. The Bambino had a talent for walloping four-baggers. His 60 homers in 1927 broke the record he himself had set in 1921. He was the most colorful and beloved of all sports heroes. President Harding hailed the Sultan of SWAT, as did kings and commoners. But he remained a big, friendly kid. As prize fighter or football player, the king of clout was always good for a chuckle, a happy-go-lucky symbol of a happy-go-lucky age. Above all, he was the idol of the youngsters who saw in this orphan the culmination of all their sandlot dreams. Babe Ruth was not only Mr. Baseball, he was Mr. Athlete, Mr. Golden Twenties, Mr. America, the king of sports when sports were king.
A 19-year-old girl from America came to brave the treacherous English Channel, and her name was Gertrude Ederle. Gertrude received a coating of grease to provide some warmth against the icy currents, and then, with a kiss from her father, she set forth on August 6, 1926. The plucky girl from the Bronx faced a choppy 19-mile stretch that through the years had made millions seasick just crossing it by boat. Meals of chocolate were fed to her en route, and in the true spirit of the 20s, a band went along to spur her on. Now, in the center of the channel, great waves threatened to dash her against the boat, a taste of the heavy going between Cape Grisnez, France, and Dover, England, that only 5 men and no woman had ever conquered. But Gertrude Ederle made it, and she made it in 14 hours, 34 minutes, 2 hours less than any man. Athletes from more than 30 nations gather in St. Moritz for the 12th Winter Olympics. Figure skating is a favorite. From Belgium come Michelin Lenoy and Pierre Ebonnier, a graceful twosome who capture first-place honors. They finish with the skaters' au revoir. Barbara Ann Scott, 19-year-old ballerina of the ice, thrills the crowd in an outstanding exhibition of flashing blades. A gold medal goes to this Canadian queen of the ice in these first Olympics of the post-war era. 18-year-old Richard Button of Englewood, New Jersey, makes a clean sweep of both the school figures and free skating. His flawless display of artistry overcomes the lead of his Swiss competitor. The 1948 Games introduce alpine skiing. Mrs. Gretchen Fraser of Vancouver, Washington, makes a spectacular run to capture the slalom honors, pigtails and all. In the world of college football, Notre Dame's Knute Rockne stands alone. Rock trained his teams tirelessly and fired them with inspiration. With the legendary 4 horsemen in the backfield and the 7 mules on the front line, his Fighting Irish chalked up an unbelievable 105 victories against only 12 defeats and 5 ties. Rockne himself, here with his pretty daughter, did more to popularize football than any other man. In 1930 at South Bend, a tremendous crowd greeted the return of Notre Dame's 5th unbeaten team in Rock's 12 years as head coach. Just a few months later, on March 31st, 1931, he was killed in an airplane crash in Kansas. These are the last pictures of the beloved Rock, taken as he taught a few fundamentals to his son, Jackie.
In 1919, a tough young man challenged the champ, Jess Willard, in what most thought would be an easy title defense. Although 5 inches shorter and 60 pounds lighter, Jack Dempsey demolished Willard to win the heavyweight championship of the world. A tremendous mob jammed Jersey City. It was the Dempsey-Carpentier fight, July 2nd, 1921, history's first $1 million gate. Nicknamed the Orchid Kid, Georges Carpentier was enormously popular. 80,000 watched as Dempsey knocked him out in 4 rounds. Dempsey fought a total of 148 bouts, winning 108 of them by knockouts. But the mauler from Manassas, Colorado, was as gentle outside the ring as he was brutal within. We're witnessing one of the champion's worst beatings. Jack Dempsey, one of boxing's legendary greats.
In tennis, Little Bill Johnston and Big Bill Tilden fought throughout the 20s. Big Bill usually won, but that was no discredit to Johnston, for Tilden had been voted the greatest tennis star of the century. In 1921, President Warren Harding turned out to see him play on the White House court. Tilden dominated his game for 10 straight years and won 7 national championships. Tilden, R. Norris Williams, a survivor of the Titanic, Johnston, and Bench Richards helped keep the Davis Cup in America for 7 consecutive years. Here were the Big Four in 1926, the last year of the American streak, as Tilden makes one of his infrequent bobbles and registers deep dismay. They were tops in tennis in the golden age. Crowds gathered in front of the Capitol, some pleading for peace, but most urging the president to action. Inside the White House, Woodrow Wilson conferred with his advisors. Only the year before, Wilson had won re-election with the slogan, "He kept us out of war." But on this day, April 6, 1917, he signed a proclamation of war against Germany and the Central Powers. The news was flashed over wireless transmitter. Headlines told Americans the story, for the modern radio was still years in the future. The sinking of our ships by German U-boats would not go unanswered. Everywhere there was cheering and the waving of flags. But before the end of the next year, 2 million Yanks would cross the Atlantic and 116,000 would die in the bloodiest fighting the world had ever seen. On June 5, 1917, 10 million got in line as every American man between the ages of 21 and 30 registered for the first U.S. draft since the Civil War. Secretary of War Baker pulled the first number from a goldfish bowl. For more than 14 hours straight, officials drew the lottery numbers. Excited crowds watched bulletin boards like this one run by a Jewish-language newspaper. By December 15th, 500,000 men had been sent to training camps, built in only 2 months, a construction job that used enough roofing to cover Manhattan, with Atlantic City thrown in. You may have been a farm boy from Nebraska, a ribbon clerk from California, a piano tuner from New York. But from now on, you'll get up to music at 5:45, do your own washing, and wear your hair close to the bone. You're in the Army now. Who's that? Quiet, children, it's not King Kong. It's Mr. Ape, symbol of the monkey trial that rocked the hot and dusty town of Dayton, Tennessee in July 1925 and set the nation on its ear. A circus atmosphere prevailed as a local biology teacher was hauled into court for teaching Darwin's theory of evolution that man and monkeys had common ancestors. The defendant's name was John T. Scopes. To Dayton to conduct the prosecution came he of the silver tongue, William Jennings Bryan, 3 times a presidential candidate. Opposing Bryan before Judge John Ralston was America's most dazzling criminal lawyer, Clarence Darrow. Scopes was found guilty, but Bryan, though victorious, was shattered by Darrow's relentless cross-examination. A popular song summed up the results. They can't make a monkey out of me. It was the Volstead Act, and in January of 1920, Prohibition became the law of the land. Chicago, heart of the bootleg industry, had over 10,000 speakeasies. Protecting a nation of 125 million from the evils of liquor were 1,500 ill-paid Prohibition agents constantly tempted by graft. But Americans didn't want to be protected. Say, Joe sent me, and the doors opened to a fun-filled world tinged with danger and poisonous booze. Prior to the 18th Amendment, taverns were a man's domain, but the speakeasy made everyone equal. The population had so much fun defying the authorities that for more than a dozen years, nothing was done about changing the unpopular law. On December 5th, 1933, the 21st Amendment was ratified, and the noble experiment was over. Legal booze was almost as much fun, and it was cheaper. Driving his own car, President Franklin D. Roosevelt motored from the Little White House in Warm Springs, Georgia, to the Pine Valley Resettlement Project. It was a pilot community to reclaim barren land and to better the lives of underprivileged dirt farmers.
Your government, and I say to you, you cannot borrow your way out of debt, but you can invest your way into a sounder future.
Another New Deal project was the first low-income municipal housing on New York's Lower East Side, a $19.5 million effort. Mrs. Roosevelt officially opened the new homes, flanked by Governor Herbert Lehman on her right and three-time Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. On the home front, civil defense was the watchword as seen in these instructions by New York's Mayor LaGuardia.
Every man, woman, and child must know what to do and when to do it in the event of an attack by a foreign enemy.
Windows were painted over and blackout curtains were installed. Air raid drills became part of American life. Civil defense wardens cleared the streets and made sure all visible lights were extinguished. Everywhere they went, World War II civilians were asked to lend money to the government. They came through with $130 billion. Each one of the 7 war loan drives reached far beyond its projected goal. War bonds were an investment in America's future. Japan surrenders on August 14, 1945, and America celebrates. But over 16 million men and women have taken part in the Second World War, and bringing them home would be the largest troop movement in world history. It cost the nation about $200 to bring a soldier back from Okinawa, about $100 from Europe. America's railroads are mobilized to return them to the hundreds of military centers. The job of transport began in April with VE Day and will continue well into 1946. At Army, Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard separation centers throughout the country, an accelerated program is daily returning thousands of veterans to civilian life. The honorably discharged are given their mustering out pay, a total of more than $3 billion. But our obligations do not end there. Government offices are set up to aid the veteran in every aspect of his return to civilian life. America's thanks for a job well done. Alaska is the Eskimo word for great land, and a great land it is, equal to 1/5 the size of the continental U.S. Vitus Bering, a Dane working for Russia, discovered it in 1741. Purchased from Russia for $7,200,000, Alaska is a treasure trove of natural resources, able to provide 2 million board feet of lumber a year. Fishing and canning are the biggest industry. The famous Alaska fur seal abounds, and the mountains contain all but 2 of the 33 minerals deemed strategic. The Alcan Highway is Alaska's only land link with her sister states. It leads to Anchorage, Alaska's largest city, where the headlines in July 1958 announced Congress's approval of statehood. There was jubilation in the streets. Alaskans could look forward with pride to a new flag and a 49th star. While nearly 5 million men mobilized for war, America's women went to work. New York got female cops. In Chicago, women letter carriers. The government had taken over the railroads. Now the ladies did too, filling jobs from engineer to yard laborer. And when she wasn't working in office, factory, or farm, the gallant female knit socks for the doughboys, wrote letters to her man overseas, and heeded the call of Food Administrator Herbert Hoover by cutting down on wheat, meat, fats, and sugar. Food will win the war. Even the precarious profession of steeplejack had its lady practitioners. Her unceasing efforts helped end World War I and won her the vote. But above all, she remained a woman. The 1910s were filled with determined ladies, and the most determined were the parading, crusading, never-say-die suffragettes. Their motto, votes for women. Their greatest weapon, an unquenchable zeal. Former President Teddy Roosevelt, no small admirer of courage and spirit, was a staunch friend who encouraged them from the porch of his home in Oyster Bay, New York. The insufferable suffragettes, as their opponents called them, capped their exploits by picketing the White House itself. A riot developed, and soon the paddy wagon arrived to pack the pickets off to prison. To their burden of ridicule and hostility was added time in jail. It only spurred them on. Upon release, they proudly donned their prison garb and toured the country, their banner proclaiming, "Resistance to tyranny is obedience to God." Through the 20s, styles grew increasingly daring. By 1922, bathing stockings were on their last legs. Grandpa, ever ogling the ladies, had fewer curves to look at. The flapper had traded them in for that boyish figure, but she was still girlish enough to win loving cups. As for street fashions, the world had never before seen anything like them. Short skirts and misplaced waistlines were to become symbols of a rip-roaring age of flaming youth, prohibition, and Coolidge prosperity. Posed on a Philadelphia roof, this contest winner shows her boyish bob. Gambling ships anchored just beyond the 3-mile limit found women among their best customers, girls with it who call themselves the Lost Generation. During the turbulent 30s, bathing suits dwindled with the national income, while hemlines tumbled down with the stock market. Like many another fad of the temporary 20s, exposed knees became just a memory. Princess Eugenie hats were pulled down over one eye. Big veils had a big vogue. Some girls cut their hair short, and some piled it up high. Mrs. Franklin Roosevelt, the first lady of the land, traveled everywhere and became an important part of the American scene. In the Atlantic City of 1935, we see the Miss America beauty pageant, and everyone can draw his own conclusion whether styles and beauty have changed over the decades. The winner, Henrietta Lever, a $1 million beauty from a McKeesport, Pennsylvania 5 and 10-cent store. Honest. The fateful 40s brought World War II. Wax and waves marched off to serve with the men. Under fire on the shell-riddled Anzio beachhead, Army nurses worked round the clock. Outfitted with fatigue clothes and helmets, they dug in with the rest. But through it all, they remained women. In war plants, on endless assembly lines, the ladies fought the battle of production. And, like their mothers before them in World War I, they went to work on the railroads. The post-war period brought Louis Rayard's bikini bathing suit and some more conservative models, announcing to the world that curves were really back. After a half-century of progress and service, the ladies were more feminine than ever, and their fashion showed it. The world of professional sports made way for the ladies. From Florida to Oregon, female baseball leagues packed them in. Women invaded the bone-jarring world of football. This San Francisco team proved they could be just as tough as the men. When Millie Burke originated professional wrestling for women, who could have foreseen the furor? But the biggest attraction was the roller derby. The ladies were governed by the same rough and tumble rules as the men. Later, television would come along and show the action up close, making this organized mayhem a $1 million sports bonanza. The women of 1910 would look at amazement at their great-granddaughters of today. Watch out for her uppercut. Whoops! Out in Rego Park, Long Island, 7 young women with no previous construction experience begin building a 3-bedroom masonry house in the fond expectation of completing the walls within a week. The project is sponsored by the Vita Construction Company to show the ease with which a new type of house can be put up using special tools and equipment. Madge applies a layer of mortar, while Dee strikes a few blocks. Meanwhile, Barbara mixes a new batch of mortar. Masonry houses can provide a low-cost and luxurious answer to the post-war housing crunch. A special gun is used to distribute the mortar. This home can be completed for less than $10,000, although regular union labor might be less photogenic. Get a horse, they cried, and they meant it. At the turn of the century, the growing feud between horse owners and car owners often erupted in match races. Automobiles were primitive but improving. Charles Duryea came up with the carburetor. Charles Kettering perfected the self-starter. Dobbin breezed home to triumph and disillusionment, for the interest of the crowd was not in the victor, but the vanquished. Within 3 decades, the horse, man's chief means of transportation for centuries, was to vanish almost entirely from the nation's thoroughfares. A wondrous change was sweeping over Main Street. By 1903, production of cars had reached a stupendous 9,000 a year. Begoggled drivers passed in polished metal splendor. There were still some hitches, though, and most of the hitches were attached to horses.
Look out! This Brooklyn man is testing his crash-proof bumper. Ever since Carl Benz first put an engine on wheels, America has been in love with the car. Though you can't always tell by the way we treat them. Another genius came up with this test for his invention, an indestructible chassis. Somewhere under all that mess is a perfect chassis. Back in 1916, cars came in every conceivable shape and size. There were 140 different U.S. manufacturers then. Today, there are 4. 1919 saw the first traffic lights here on New York's Fifth Avenue. They were complicated affairs, operated by policemen in towers high above the hubbub. By 1920, 1 out of every 13 Americans owned a car.
With the increase in motor vehicles, garage owners have difficulty finding skilled and trustworthy employees. An auto mechanic must be able to do all engine work, such as repairing the camshaft or grinding valves. He must also be a machinist and a welder. The use of heaters, windshield wipers, and radios has complicated the electrical work of the serviceman. The care and adjustment of brakes is also a vital skill. The man who becomes expert in repairing engines may specialize in that. Body and fender shops employ men for those repairs. There are battery and electrical shops. Brake testing and wheel alignment are also specialties. All of this begins with thorough training. If you qualify, you too may find employment in the automotive service industry. This is Bill Bowers. He's new here. Back home in Phoenix, Bill had the biggest collection of traffic citations in town. He was pretty cool, all right, but the sleepy Joes here didn't seem to appreciate him. They all drove around like little old ladies. What Bill didn't know was that the hot rodders here had banded together in responsible, safety-conscious organizations, like the 1320 Club and the Rambling Rods. Being cool meant more than just driving fast. And Bill's classmates soon put him wise. He got a job after school and used the money to fix up Light and Bolt the right way. He read every book on mechanics he could get and then went to work replacing the brake lines and fixing the carburetor. Bill had joined the more than 2.5 million young Americans in hot rod clubs dedicated to safety and friendly competition. At New York's Idlewild Airport, a sleek little bundle from Britain creates a brief whirl of excitement. Airline mechanics shake their heads at a motor that sits sideways, making 80% of the car's length available for passenger use. Front-wheel drive eliminates the familiar hump in the floor and lets the car whiz around at up to 70 miles an hour. Built to accommodate limited spaces, it proves that parking in crowded New York needn't be a problem. Extra storage space turns up in surprising places. Built-in station wagon-type convenience handles the large packages. All of this in the amazing length of only 10 feet. After an introduction at the International Car Show, this economical bundle from Britain is bound to show up quite often on this nation's highways and byways.
Like the excitement backstage at a Broadway opening, the 1961 Motorama props are brought together for a nationwide tour. And when the house lights are dropped, top performers of show business will co-star with the new cars from General Motors. Now the scale model stages become life-size as the automobiles in the cast go through a final rehearsal, just as actors do. Workmen dress up the exhibits, too, for the roadshow, and there's a dress rehearsal in the family's favorite room. While practicing raising the curtain, even the stage crew breaks into applause. Movies are also made of the glittering production. Tabbed the greatest industrial show on wheels, it'll roll across the nation from New York to California.
You are looking at a modern wonder, the Presto Park Mechanical Garage. Requiring a single attendant and taking the ground space of only 4 cars, the Presto Park can accommodate 12, all of them instantly accessible. Need to park your Valiant? Drive right in. This is an inexpensive alternative to other mechanical parkers. The Speed Park system costs as much as $2,800 per stall. Presto Park is much less and is movable. Mrs. Morgan returns. Before she can even find her ticket, her Dodge will be out of its slot. Harry stands by patiently. Even though Presto did the parking for them, shopping is still a big chore. Just like that, Mrs. Morgan drives out of the Presto Park and back to White Plains. American fashions were inspired by the new 1961 cars. Beside this cream-colored wagon is the family, decked out in woolens. Plaids predominate in these 2 colorful outfits, which accent the styling of the Olds F-85. Her gathered skirt is an American Indian print. His 3-button sports jacket is a large shadow plaid. The mottled green of this gown is matched by the polyester fabric top, or polka dots to match a cocktail dress. Change your car as often as your clothes. What better way to show off the latest in fashion than in a convertible? You don't have to wear a crown to feel like a queen. This Ivory Olds 98 could make anyone feel like royalty. An all-black revue called Runnin' Wild introduced a new dance step in 1924, named after a South Carolina city that Charleston became an immediate craze. The music was a fast foxtrot, but the movements were violently acrobatic, matching the frenzy of a jazz orchestra. Even more athletic was the 1925 variation known as the Black Bottom. America was dancing. The camel walk, the shuffle, the toddle, the sex-charged tango. From Isadora Duncan to Arthur Murray, everyone was doing it. Nice people did the more erotic dances only as an occasional spree, but morals were changing. The men won't dance with you if you wear a corset, the women explained, and so corsets went out. An editorial in Cincinnati's Catholic Telegraph went on the attack. The music is sensuous, and emotions, they are such as may not be described in a family newspaper. Don't try this at home. To participate in the dangerous sport of tumble drying, you need a college degree, and it might be helpful if your pilot light was out. The boys at Alpha Theta Omega are engaging in a little friendly competition and doing their laundry at the same time. The crowd keeps track of the fast-paced contest. That's Chester on the left, Lester on the right. Ah, college, just one mad whirl. But it's not all fun and games. Serious subjects are studied. Trajectory, interpersonal relationships, strategy, leadership skills, chivalry, not to mention engineering. It was better left unmentioned.
This man is an expert with a Filipino jungle weapon. We call it the yo-yo. Donald Duncan of Chicago began selling these deadly objects to American youngsters in 1926, and the mayhem hasn't ceased. The world's largest yo-yo weighed 256 pounds and was launched from a crane in San Francisco. That's some yo-yo. If you have to set a world's record in something, why not the hula hoop? A man in London whirled 81 hoops at the same time, while a 12-year-old girl from Anderson, California, set a marathon hula record of 60 hours. Of course, hula hooping is not for everyone. It takes brain power, a strong character, and great manual dexterity, not to mention hips.
In 1934, Union Pacific streamlined their locomotives. A year later, everything was being streamlined, as this Hollywood exhibition shows. Gladys here looks like she could do 60. The Fast Women of 1935. Doing his bit in the battle against wind resistance was Ferdinand of Paris. He simply deplored that modern times wouldn't permit long hairdos, but he was Johnny on the spot with sleek stylings. The nape of the neck just had to be uncovered, and the more you resembled a DeSoto hood ornament, the better. In 1936, a fur fashion show was held in front of Prometheus at the new and glamorous Rockefeller Center. Everything from ermine to raccoon coats for men. That's what 6th Avenue was saying. Take your streamlined look and wrap it in fur. Some days it seems like everyone has to use the phone at the same time. Actually, this is the collegiate sport of phone booth jamming, Parisian style. A bundle of worthwhile American pursuits crossed the Atlantic in the late 50s. Soon, from Oxford to the Sorbonne, students were studying advanced subjects like jammed room dancing and seeing how many people can squeeze onto 8 chairs. This one is a new French record. 30 people stuffed into a 4-passenger Citroën. We'll buzz around the Arc de Triomphe a few times, then hit the open road. Hold on to your beret. Dance marathons start out as a lot of fun. A week or so later, the enthusiasm dies down. Marathon dancing had its heyday in the early Depression. For just a small fee, you could dance forever. In fact, that was your goal. This New York contest was a walk in the park compared to what happened at the Merry Garden Ballroom in Chicago. Mike Riddoff and Edith Boudreau danced for 215 days, from August of 1930 to April 1931, and finally shared a grand prize of $2,000. The dancers always received the best medical attention. And there were rest periods, 5 minutes every hour, whether you needed it or not. College teaches you a lot of things, like how to take care of your piano. Actually, these New Jersey students have enrolled in a course, how to fit an upright piano through an 8-inch hole. It may look like a snap, but later in the semester, they'll have to put it back together again. Notice how carefully they dismantle and number each piece. That's for easy reassembly later on. Across the Hudson at New York's Columbia University, the students shun such frivolities. Oh, this must be a philosophy course. The goal of life is like a greased pole with a pretty girl on top. You have to fight at the bottom, and you might never make it all the way up. But the joy is in the trying. You learn things like that at college. The story of rocket power dates back to the first rocket plane, a landmark in aviation history. An asbestos-clad scientist lights the fuse and then runs for cover. No one fully realized the power about to be unleashed. Estimates are that a full-scale model might have traveled another 20 feet. This dynamite backpack enjoyed a brief period of popularity in Toledo, Ohio, about 2 minutes. The inventor's theory was that every man could be his own rocket ship or a fireworks display. Sam, you made the pants too hot. Whoa! Science really marched forward with Germany's rocket car. The first model ran on a track. One small problem. Smoke! An improved rocket was unveiled. And this time... There are many kinds of motorcycle races, all dangerous. Motocross racing began in England in 1924. Road racing has its roots in France, where the first international race was held in 1904. Dirt track racing became popular when cyclists took over harness racing tracks. There are plenty of spills, but that's what makes it exciting. During the 1938 Laconia 200, America's Ed Kretz fell off once, repaired his carburetor, and lost his left footboard, but he won the race. Pete, look out! The perils of a cameraman. No story on motorcycles would be complete without showing the annual 200-mile classic on the slippery, shifting sands of Daytona Beach. The cyclist who doesn't cruise along the Atlantic coast at 90 miles an hour is considered somewhat of a sissy. Experts say it dates back 3,000 years. It is called the sport of kings, but you don't have to be royalty to enjoy horse racing. It's the most popular spectator sport in America. The period between World War I and the Depression was racing's golden age. And if this golden age had a golden horse, it had to be Big Red, the legendary man o' war. In 1920, Man o' War as a 3-year-old met Sir Barton, his closest rival. Sir Barton had won the Triple Crown the season before, but you'd think his usual job was pulling an ice wagon from the way Man o' War finished, all by himself. Big Red raced for only 2 years, went to the post only 21 times, and never won the Triple Crown. But he so outshone his competition that he's generally regarded as the greatest thoroughbred of all time. In his last year, Man o' War broke a record in 8 of his 11 races. Due to a bad start, he lost the Sanford Stakes in 1919, but that was the only time.
Wembley Stadium, England, scene of the 1948 Olympics. These were the first games to be held since World War II, and the last before the Soviets entered with their state-supported athletes. In the pole vault, America's Win Smith soared to a first-place medal. Another gold medal for the U.S., Willie Steele in the broad jump. In the grueling 800 meters, America's Mal Whitfield opened up and burned his way into the lead. Here's the blistering 100 meters. Harrison Dillard of the U.S., a picture of powerful grace. Dillard breaks over the finish line and bursts into wild jubilation. America's men would win 11 of the 24 track and field events in these last truly amateur Olympic Games. This is stock car racing, and the sands of Daytona Beach come alive with 105 hot rods in a contest you'll have to see to believe. On Madman's Curve, this crack-up classic comes to a crashing climax. Take a dirt track and fill it with stock cars held together with chicken wire and pure fool nerve. The result is a jalopy jam fest, a nightmare on wheels. A madness seems to sweep over the contestants. Hold on to your seats, for you are witnessing the most stupendous crack-up in all racing history. 16 autos pile up in 30 seconds. Miraculously, no one is killed in an accident that just goes on and on. Once, as many as 80 men pulled the ships of ancient Egypt and Rome. Now the number of rowers is 8, and the ships are 18-meter shells. Crew racing in the U.S. dates back to 1851, when Yale and Harvard raced each other on the Charles River. But other schools have proved themselves on the water, notably Cornell and, of course, Navy. A stroke is divided into 3 parts: the catch, the stroke itself, and the recovery. Crack crews start out at well beyond 30 strokes a minute and rarely fall below this mark. They collapse in exhaustion. Few other sports call upon the competitor's last ounce of strength. Rowing is a grueling sport. But it's duck soup to these 20 perky grandmas from Oakland, California. With coxswain Clara Fennell, herself a great-grandmother, urging them on, these whaleboat Annies give their muscles a weekly workout. From the Temple of Hera at Olympia in northern Greece, the Olympic flame is rekindled from the sun, according to tradition. And from Greece, it starts its journey to France and the 12th Winter Olympics. At Orly Airport, the torch is carried by runners through the rain. Pierre de Coubertin, a Frenchman, revived the Olympics in 1896. The runners carry the torch through the streets of Paris. But before continuing on to the Alps, a greeting from President Charles de Gaulle at the Paris City Hall. Another Olympic year, 1968, begins with the torch's arrival at Grenoble, site of the Winter Games. Later, it will be carried to Mexico City for the second half of the world's most famous athletic contest. Man has been fighting fire ever since Augustus established the first fire marshals in 27 BC. In the past, fires destroyed Chicago and San Francisco and vast sections of Boston, Baltimore, and New York. But firefighting has progressed from the hook and ladder of the 1920s to today's battleship on wheels with every possible device for speed and safety. The 310,000 U.S. firefighters work hard, up to 72 hours a week, as they sleep and eat together, waiting for the next alarm. Boston gets the honors for having America's first paid firemen in 1679. Ben Franklin himself organized the first volunteer fire department in Philadelphia. Professional or volunteer, it is the courageous smoke eater who stands between our world and disaster. The tall buildings of Manhattan are perching places not only for pigeons, but for human flies, who specialize in hanging from ledges and doing handstands on windowsills. Al Ritchie climbs with an American flag in tow and waves it from the 18th floor. Daredevil Reynolds is seeing Broadway the hard way from 21 stories up. You might not get good service at this table, but what a view of Herald Square. If you think Reynolds is crazy, you should see what his cameraman is standing on. Sailor Rudy Camino takes his act to the Hudson River. Rudy? Where'd he go? No one said it was going to be easy. What's this pretty redhead up to? 22 stories over Lexington Avenue. No, they're not making her test elevator cables. She's a daredevil, too. If Pearl White can do it, why not her? Charles Augustus Lindbergh, a 25-year-old male pilot from Detroit, prepares his Ryan monoplane. On May 20th, 1927, with 4 sandwiches and 3 letters of introduction, Lindbergh takes off from Roosevelt Field. His goal, a $25,000 prize for the first non-stop flight to Paris. 33 and 1/2 hours later, he lands at the Bourget Field. A tremendous crowd greets him. Lucky Lindy wouldn't need any letters of introduction. Europe hails the new hero. President Coolidge sends the cruiser Memphis to bring the Lone Eagle home. A parade along Pennsylvania Avenue and a Medal of Honor follow. But the real celebration is waiting in New York, down Fifth Avenue, while 4 million cheer and throw confetti. Female emancipation brought a new breed to the 20s, the woman aerial daredevil. Her motto seemed to be, anything a man can do, I can do better. The dauntless little lady is Mabel Cody. Gladys Ingle used shackled ankles and a hook for her hair-raising transfers from plane to plane. Most amazing of all was 10-year-old Mildred Unger, who got right into the spirit of the Roaring '20s by doing the Charleston 2,000 feet up. A few years earlier, no woman would think of changing a tire. Now, Gladys Ingle did it the hard way, carrying a whole wheel aloft. Imagine transferring planes while hanging onto a heavy wheel. From daredevils to pioneers, as vivacious Ruth Elder became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, her monoplane was a tribute to the American girl. Strongmen may be silent, but they're not camera shy. Sailor White is pulling 4 cars with his teeth. Horse fancier Warren Travis thought nothing of a tug-of-war with 6 of his closest friends. Actually, this is his patented method for broadening the shoulders. Whoops-a-daisy. Here's the secret of Warren's strength: ice cream and lady fingers. Al Ritchie uses a steel bar to go on a bender. Strongmen became popular in America when Eugene Sandow came over from Germany in the gay 90s. By the 20s, they were all the rage. Here's Al and his girlfriend, Rapunzel. They know how to have a good time. The appeal of strongmen lies in the fact that they do so many practical things. This is Al Ritchie again, as the fulcrum of a one-sided seesaw. Commander Richard E. Byrd perfectly suited the age of heroes. He prepared his giant Fokker trimotor for the flight that was to carry him and pilot Floyd Bennett over the North Pole in 1926. En route to Kings Bay in the Arctic, Byrd charted the course with his officers, then settled down to muscle-building exercises. A lucky cameraman got these rare, candid pictures of the usually reticent explorer. Byrd encored by flying the Atlantic in 1927 and over the South Pole in 29. America's non-stop conquerors of the Atlantic posed for posterity. Lucky Lindy did it first by flying to Paris. Byrd later made it to the French coast, while Clarence Chamberlain flew all the way to Berlin. Yuri A. Gagarin takes a place of honor between Lenin and Khrushchev. Orbiting the Earth a single time in his Vostok 1, this 27-year-old Air Force major became the world's first spaceman. At Moscow Airport, Gagarin salutes Premier Khrushchev, who responds with a bear hug and repeated kisses on the lips. The world applauds as the cosmonaut, his wife Valentina by his side, receives the most spectacular welcome in Soviet history. It took Magellan nearly 3 years to circle the globe. Gagarin did it from 188 miles up and in only 108 minutes. In the Kremlin, Gagarin is awarded a special medal named for Zlakovsky, Russia's pioneer rocket scientist, along with the nation's highest civilian honor, Hero of the Soviet Union. The fearless stuntman is giving a sterling performance when director Harry Griffin learns there's a fire in town. In the early days, film companies would rush to the scenes of actual fires, floods, earthquakes, and parades. They pushed their actors into the action and wrote stories to fit later. Fearless is none other than the cross-eyed wonder, Ben Turpin. Lucky for him, there's an air hose. Meanwhile, arriving at the fire, the director gives his leading lady, Irene Lentz, a prop baby and tells her to run into the smoke and flames. The firemen make trouble. The nerve of those bums, yells the director. They'll spoil the shot. And as he slowly sinks into the sunset, we bid our hero a fond farewell. This is Harry Houdini's try at movie stardom. In a 1919 serial, Houdini played a Department of Justice investigator named Quentin Locke. Quentin's girlfriend is Eva Brent, daughter of the chief villain. This is Q, the automaton. In each episode, Quentin was tied up or chained or locked in a box so that moviegoers could witness one of Houdini's miraculous escapes. This 15-episode chapter play was called The Mystery Master. It told the story of Quentin's battle against the evil International Patents, a company that stood in the way of progress by buying up inventions and keeping them off the market. Q is one of the inventions gone wrong. Houdini never made it in the movies. Due to his own puritanical nature, he could never act a convincing love scene. And his daring escapes that were so thrilling on stage lost their thrills on the magic screen. The movie love scene began with a kinetoscope short called The Kiss with Mary Irwin and John Rice. The first great star was Mary Pickford, here in the arms of Owen Moore. The crowd is played by James Kirkwood. Lillian Gish charmed millions in her quaint, mischievous love scenes. Her bashful suitor was Bobby Harron. When it came to westerns, William S. Hart was the king. He had his own style of lovemaking. Notice this fiery kiss with Bessie Love. Wallace Reed brought an easy, good-natured charm to his love scenes. This is from The Dancing Fool. A new brand of kissing was introduced by Paul Negri in this tale of World War I called Shadows of Paris. Children were the specialty of Hal Roach, but other directors got into the act, in this case, Max Sennett. Sparky, the first base coach, gives Petey a hand rounding the bases. Meanwhile, in the bullpen, Horace is testing out his new pitching machine. That's Charlie Murray at the washtub, one of Sennett's favorite foils. Time out! I tell you why Charlie has his apron on backwards, but that's another story. The Keystone Kids clam up. I never seen that rock before in my life.
What these little monsters need is discipline. Come on. 1, 2. Whoops. Perhaps the busiest man on any Hollywood lot is the screen director. Every detail that goes into the making of a movie must have his approval. Before a frame of film is shot, he has been through countless meetings, offered his suggestions to the writer during script development, and come to a meeting of minds with the producer. He arranges the set dressing, the furniture and props to conform with his ideas, and selects the supporting players who best fit the story. For weeks, film races through the camera at 90 feet a minute, but filming is only half his job. He edits the footage with the cutter and makes sure the musical score fits the action. And his biggest challenge still lies ahead. For you are his final judge. Through all the hectic months of work, the screen director's one goal is to make a film worthy of the American movie-going public.
I'm the Papa Bear.
I'm the Mama Bear. I'm the little baby bear.
In the 1930s, a man with the unlikely name of Ub Iwerks produced Comicolor cartoons. This is his 1935 version of an old favorite.
Somebody's been fooling with my radio. Looks like dirty footwork.
World War I, and the most frenzied of home front activities was shipbuilding. Ships made of wood exceeded those of steel by more than 2 to 1, and shipyard workers received the same hero status as fighting men. Launchings reached an astonishing 150 a month. But this was also a war of industrial production. Edison, awarded a medal for his war efforts, inspects an army truck, later driven away by the jaunty Secretary of War, Newton D. Baker. President Wilson, whose appearances grew rarer as his burdens increased, provides history's scrapbook with a typical and human pose. Piano factories turned out wings, auto body manufacturers turned out fuselages, and a new weapon of war took its place in the arsenal, the battle plane. The Brooklyn Bridge was one of the greatest achievements of American engineering. Never before had so complex a project been undertaken with such new materials as steel and cable. But there was an element of tragedy as well. The bridge cost the life of its designer, John Roebling, and crippled his son, Washington. Dedicated in 1883, it was the tallest structure in New York and the longest bridge in the world. 2.5 times longer is the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Completed in 1964, it linked the boroughs of Brooklyn and Staten Island. This mile-long engineering marvel took $325 million and 5 years to complete. Miss Liberty welcomed a new neighbor, a landmark that can be seen 40 miles at sea. The machine arithmetique, developed by a French mathematician, was the world's first mechanical brain over 300 years ago. Now, man's creative genius has perfected the fastest, most amazing electronic calculator, the UNIVAC by Remington Rand. It can multiply and divide more than 2,000 times a second. Magnetic tape is used to store data, and more than 2 million digits can be recorded on a single reel. This memory vault retains the information put out by the 11 units that make up the calculator. Problems that might take a person using a desk computer 7 years are solved now in 7 minutes. The calculator has tremendous business applications. Billings can be turned out with lightning speed. Errors are forever eliminated through the magic of electronics. The old trustworthy telephone has given birth to many new devices. The remote feeding of computers, nationwide television transmission, remote control systems for industry, and, of course, the increased use of the extension phone. These are all the tools of telephony. This is Western Electric's Indianapolis plant. Here are made the telephone instruments, 7 million a year. A few ounces of plastic become a handset housing by the use of a polished steel die that took 6 months and $55,000 to make. Transistors, the heart of the modern telephone, use so little current that today's familiar bell, which rings on 85 volts, may someday be replaced by a transistorized musical tone needing only 1 volt. Radio is an important world force, providing both entertainment and news. Realizing this, the U.S. Information Agency established the Voice of America in 1942 to promote understanding. In Voice of America headquarters near the Capitol, Foreign Aid Chief Harold Stassen and Theodore Stribert, director of the Information Agency, tour the ultra-modern studios. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Voice of America programs reach an audience of 75 million around the world. Programs originate in Washington, then are broadcast by shortwave. Relay stations operate in Europe, the Middle East, South Asia, and East Asia, in English and 37 other languages. The Voice of America is an objective and reliable source of news. In December 1957, just 2 months after Sputnik, America had high hopes for its own satellite, Project Vanguard, a 3-pound, 6.5-inch sphere equipped with a tiny radio transmitter. This is the moment of truth, the result of 29 months of intensive labor. At Cape Canaveral, Florida, the satellite is placed in the nose of the rocket that must catapult it 300 miles into space. The cone is lowered into position. Towering 72 feet over the sands, the 4-ton rocket is ready for firing. Newsmen from all over the world are there. Tension mounts. What happens next is unhappy history. 7 seconds after launching, the rocket is a ruin. $100 million in research go up in a huge red-orange ball of smoke. Dateline tomorrow. A miracle metal becomes the pace setter of the 20th century. Light, strong, easily fabricated, and versatile. Aluminum. Aluminum can come in many varied and beautiful finishes. A hand-hammered tray, a color-buffed tea kettle, a scratch-brushed pot or pan. Aluminum's versatility extends to the office in everything from picture frames to easy-to-clean ashtrays. In industry, colored aluminum fittings can be used for quick identification, also perfect for nameplates and easy-to-read dials. This escalator shows aluminum strength and beauty. From silver-plated radio equipment to plated aluminum hardware, it is the metal of tomorrow. From today's aluminum foil on cigarettes to tomorrow's evening wrap of aluminum cloth.
At the foot of Brooklyn, 9 miles from Manhattan, lies a narrow sandbar called Coney Island. You entered it through the barrel of fun and headed straight for the steeplechase. The original steeplechase was built in 1897 and burned down 10 years later. This rebuilt version was over half a mile long, but it still gave you the same chance to put your arms around your sweetie and show off how good a jockey you were. Coney Island was America's great amusement park. At its peak, over 1 million people a day came. And even if it was raining, the Pavilion of Fun had 5 acres of indoor entertainment. The hot dog was invented here in 1874. They had a Ferris wheel that could be seen 38 miles at sea. And Coney Island still runs one of the scariest roller coasters in the world, the Cyclone. F. Scott Fitzgerald called it the Jazz Age. From Broadway to Harlem, New York in the 20s was swinging. Victorian restraints were replaced by rouged knees and bobbed hair, and the nightclubs flourished. Rudy Valley, the vagabond lover, played his sax and sang into a megaphone. Paul Whiteman took the strange new sound of jazz and made it easy to accept. And if the legal nightlife was too tame, dozens of speakeasy clubs lined 52nd Street. The flamboyant Texas Guinan called her customers suckers, but always gave them a good show. Jack and Charlie's Speak is still flourishing today, though most people know it better by its address, 21. The nightlife was the only life. As New York's flamboyant mayor, Jimmy Walker, used to say, a civilized man never goes to bed on the same day he got up. What is sport number 1? Brother, you're looking at it. It's swimming. Long ago, the human race discovered there's nothing like the beach for exercise, romance, or a snooze in the sun. Leander swam the Hellespont. Alexander forded the Hydaspes. And today's Joe Doak still likes to pit his strength against the surf. With an occasional timeout, of course. And as for Joe Dokes Jr., he's splashing along in his father's footsteps. An afternoon at the beach can leave a lasting impression. Just don't tell her about it and she'll never know. And what better way to end a day of swimming than with a cool dive alongside a few close friends? Everybody into the pool! This is a story about what to do on a date. Nick would like to ask Kay out, but where would they go? What would they do? How about going to the movies with Jeff and Phyllis? When all 4 are good friends and enjoy the same things, double dates can be lots of fun. What's this? A list of coming activities. Group dates are a good idea. They give you a chance to get acquainted without too much planning or pressure. Or how about a weenie roast? A chance to learn the give and take of working and playing together. There are plenty of date ideas that don't take a lot of arranging or a lot of money. A swim meet, perhaps, or a square dance. Be sure to choose an activity your partner will enjoy. Nick and Kay are going to have a fine time.
Is it all right then about Friday?
Yes, Nick. It's the day.
Milan, Italy, 1966. And the world of high fashion meets the world of pop art. Here's a sleeveless magenta shift, mini-length, with matching jacket and jockey cap. There was also a collection of A-lines in black and multicolored cottons. From high fashion to hip fashion, trendy Barbara is dressed in a lime green halter and a jacket of fringed suede. Nigel is sporting a lizard pattern jacket with a patent leather finish. Diane's brightly patterned micro mini comes in orange. The boa is hot pink. Tim has on a hooded top in navy blue with brocaded trim, while Tom has chosen a red and gold tunic in an Aztec design. This was Swinging London in 1967, a glimpse inside a mod boutique on the fashion row called
Carnaby Street. New Orleans, Louisiana. One big mirthquake of merrymaking as the entire city turns out for their famous Mardi Gras celebration. The carnival season begins on Epiphany, January 6th, and the festivities grow until the final all-out bash on Fat Tuesday. For 10 days and nights, the parades pass through city streets. They have a problem squeezing in all the revelry that annually precedes Ash Wednesday and the 40 days of Lent. From pretty girls by the score to whimsical floats, this 1963 Mardi Gras had something to tickle every fancy. New Orleans was established by the French in 1718, and since its founding has been a city of fun, the birthplace of jazz. The mythical kings and queens of the carnival and their royal crews pull out all the stops for the Rex Parade, tossing candies and trinkets into the eager crowd. Throw me something, mister?
Parker Brothers is proud to introduce the VCR mystery game, Clue. Based on our famous murder mystery board game, Clue VCR challenges players to determine who did it, where, and with what. And to further test your deductive reasoning skills, we've added an exciting new dimension, video. Clue VCR mystery game, a unique new game that brings you hours of murder mystery fun. Look for it wherever fine games are sold.
Hold it there, Pilgrim. Parker Brothers has more news than... Well, hell, this is as big as the sky. Pretty big, the sky.
That's right, Duke. It's Rich Little Charades, a VCR version of one of America's most popular party games at reasonable prices.
Rich Little's VCR Charades game. The fun new way to keep your friends guessing for hours. Look for it where fine games are sold.